Artyom made his way through the crowd to the starting position where Mark was standing. "Everything is hush-hush," Mark announced, rubbing his hands with glee. Asked exactly what he had in mind, Mark explained that he had just thrust a personal bet upon the old chief that his own new rat would overrun the favorite on the first round. He had to put Artyom up for it, Mark reported, but in exchange he demanded a visa for all of Hansa and Artyom and himself. The chief, to be sure, rejected the proposal, saying that he doesn't engage in the slave trade. Artyom breathed a sigh of relief, but adding that such presumptuous insolence would have to be punished. If the rat lost, Mark and Artyom would have to clean the latrines at Pavlovskaya ring for 1 year. If the rat won, then okay, they would get the visa. Of course, he was positive that the second option was out of the question, which is why he agreed. He decided to punish the cocky upstarts who had dared to throw down a challenge to his head. "And do you have your rat?" Artyom asked cautiously. "Of course, Mark reassured him. "A real brute. She'll tear pirate to shreds. Do you know how she ran away from me today? I could barely catch her. I chased her nearly to Novokosnetskaya." "What's her name?" "Her name? Sure, what's her name?" "Well, let's say Rocket," Mark proposed. "Rocket, does that sound menacing?" Artyom was not sure that the competition was really intended to see whose rat would tear a rival to pieces, but he kept his mouth shut. When Mark explained that he had only caught his rat today, Artyom couldn't stand it. "And so, how do you know she's going to win?" "I believe in her, Artyom," Mark proclaimed solemnly. "And anyhow, you see, I've really wanted to have my own rat for a long time. I used to bet on other people's rats. Those would lose, and I would think to myself, never mind, the day will come when I will have my own, and she'll bring me luck. But I never decided to do it. After all, it's not that simple. You have to get permission from the referee, and that's such a drag. My whole life will go by. Some newcomer will gobble me up, or I'll die all on my own, and I'll never have my own rat. And then you turned up, and I thought, here we go. It's now or never. If you don't take a risk now, I said to myself, then you'll always be betting on someone else's rat. And I decided if I go, if I'm going to play, then let me play for high stakes. Of course, I want to help you, but excuse me for saying that's not the main thing. And so I wanted to go right up to the oak fart. Mark lowered his voice and say, I'll wager myself against your pirate. He got so enraged that he forced the referee to certify my rat out of turn. And you know, he added, barely audible, this moment will be followed by a year of cleaning the latrines. Because our rat will surely lose, Artyom desperately tried to reason with him for the last time. Mark looked at him attentively, then smiled and said, but what if? Having sternly looked over the audience, the referee smoothed his gray hair, cleared his throat with his self-importance, and began to read off the nicknames of the rats taking part in the race. Rocket was last, but Mark didn't pay any attention to that. Pirate got most applause than the others, and only Artyom clapped for Rocket because Mark's hands were occupied holding the cage. Artyom was still hoping for a miracle that would spare him from an ignominious end in the stinking abyss. Then the referee fired a blank from his Makarov, and the owners opened the cages. Rocket was the first to break out, and Artyom's heart leaped with joy. But then, while the other rats charged off along the length of passage, some slower, some faster, Rocket, not living up to her proud name, got stuck in a corner 5 meters from the starting line. And there she stayed. It was against the rules to prod the rats. Artyom glanced at Mark apprehensively, expecting that he would either start getting violent or, on the contrary, would languish, overwhelmed with grief. But the stirred, proud expression on Mark's face reminded him more of that of a captain of the cruiser who gave the order to sink the warship to prevent the enemy from capturing it. A story about some war between the Russians and somebody else that he'd in a beat-up book lying in the library, that he'd read in a beat-up book lying in the library at BE&K. After a couple of minutes, the first rats reached the finish line. Pirate won. Second place was some creature with an unintelligible name. Pushka came in third. Artyom cast a glance at the referee table. The old guy with the mustache, wiping the sweat of excitement from his bald pate with the same cloth he had used earlier to clean his glasses, was discussing the results with the referee. Artyom was already expecting that they would forget about them, when the old man suddenly slapped himself on the forehead and smiled sweetly, beckoning to Mark. Artyom felt almost like he did at the moment when they took him off for execution, although the sensation was not as strong. Making his way behind Mark to the referee's table, he confronted himself with the fact that one way or another, the coast was now clear for him to cross onto territory. The only trick was to find a way to escape. But disgrace awaited him. Swordily inviting them to come up to the dais, Mustache turned to the audience and briefly explained the wager, then loudly proclaimed that both rascals were being sent, as agreed, to clean out the sanitary facilities for 1 year, starting today. 2 hunks of border guards appeared from God knows where, took away Artyom's automatic weapon, assuring him that his main opponent in the coming year would not be dangerous, and promised to return the weapon at the end of the sentence. Then, suffering the whistling and hooting of the crowd, they were led off to the ring. The passage went under the floor at the center of the hall, just at the other station of the same name. But there, the similarities between the two Pavlovskaya ended, and the one on the ring conveyed a very strange impression. On one side, the ceiling was low. There were no real columns at all. Arches spanned equal intervals along the wall, with the width of each arch being the same as the width of the gap between them. It seemed as though the first Pavlovskaya had been easy for the builders, as if the dirt there was softer, and all one had to do was push one's way across it, whereas at the other Pavlovskaya there was some hard, unyielding rock, which was a real pain to chew through. But for some reason, this place did not produce the depressing, melancholy feeling that the Tverskaya did. Maybe because here there was so much light and the walls were decorated with simple designs and imitations of ancient columns, like in the pictures from myths of ancient Greece. In short, this was not the worst place for forced labor. And of course, it was clear right away that this was haunted territory. First of all, it was unusually clean, comfortable, and large. Real lamps cased in glass shone softly from the ceiling. In the hall itself, which, to be sure, was not as spacious as the twin station, there was not a single kissed, kissed, kissed. Though there were many work tables piled with mountains of intricate contraptions. Behind them sat people in blue overalls and a pleasant smell. The light odor of machine gun oil hung in the air. Probably the workday ended later than at the Pavlovskaya radio line. Hansa paraphernalia hung on the walls, an insignia with a brown circle on a white background. Posters, appeals to raise labor productivity, and quotes from somebody named A. Smith. Under the largest flag between the two stiff soldiers in an honor guard stood a glass table, and Artyom lingered there as he passed, just to satisfy his curiosity about what sacred object might lie beneath the glass. There in red velvet, lovingly lit with tiny lamps, lay two books. The first was a magnificently preserved, imposing volume with a black cover and a gold embossed inscription that read, Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. The second was thoroughly dog-eared. The second was a thoroughly dog-eared copy of a pocketbook, a piece of trash with a battery dust jacket that was torn and glued together again, on which thick letters spelled out Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie. How to stop worrying and start living. Artyom had never heard of either author, so what interested him much more was whether the station chief had used remnants of this velvet to upholster the cage of his beloved rat. One line was not blocked. The trolleys traveled by from time to time, most of them hand-powered, loaded with boxes. But once the motorized trolleys passed, enveloped in a cloud of smoke, and paused for a minute at the station before continuing further. Artyom was able to get a look at the strong soldiers with black uniforms and black and white striped vests who were sitting on it. Each had night vision equipment on their heads, a strange short automatic weapon against his chest, and heavy body armor. The commander, stroking the enormous dark green visored helmet that sat on his knees, exchanged a few words with the station security officers, dressed in the unusual gray camouflage, and the trolley vanished into the night. On the second line, there was a complete train in even better condition than the one Artyom had seen at Kuznetsky Bridge. There were probably living quarters behind the curtain windows, and through bare windows one could see desks with printers on them, behind which sat their usual business types, and engraved upon a sign over the door were the words Central Office. The station produced an indescribable impression on Artyom. It was not that it amazed him like the first Pavlitskaya. There were no traces there of that mysterious sombre splendor that reminded one of the degenerated descendants of bygone superhuman greatness and the power of those who had built the metro. But still, people lived here just as if they were not part of the teeming, decadent, senseless underground existence outside the ring line. Life went on in a steady, well-organized way. After the workday, there was a well-deserved rest. Young people did not go out into the fantasy world of foolish yentas, but to business. The earlier you started your career, the farther up the ladder you could move, and adults were not afraid that as soon as their strength began to ebb, they would be turned out into the tunnel to be eaten by rats. It now became comprehensible that why Hansa allowed only a few outsiders into its station, and reluctantly at that. The number of places in paradise is limited. Only in hell is entry open to all. Why, finally, I've immigrated, exclaimed Mark, looking happily about him. At the end of the platform, another border guard sat in a glass cubicle with the sign "On Duty" beside a rather small barrier painted with white and red stripes. When someone drove up to the duty officer, stopping respectfully, the guard came out of the cubicle with an expression of self-importance, inspected documents and sometimes cargo, and finally lifted the barrier. Artyom noted that all the border guards and customs officers were very proud of their posts. It was immediately obvious that they were doing something they enjoyed. On the other hand, he thought, how could one not like such work? They were taken over to a fence from which the road extended into the tunnel and turned off to the side, to a corridor for staff quarters. Dreary yellow tile and scooped-out pit holes proudly crowned the real toilet seats. Indescribably filthy overalls, square shovels with some weird stuff growing on them. A wheelbarrow with only one wheel, making wild figure eights, carts that were to be loaded up and carted off to the nearest shaft that led into the depths. And all this was enveloped in a monstrous, unimaginable stench, saturating one's clothes, seeping into each hair from root to tip, penetrating beneath the skin, so that you began to think that it had become part of your very nature and would be with you forever, scaring away your own kind and making them get out of your way before they've even seen you. The first day of this monotonous work passed so slowly that Artyom decided they had been given an infinite shift. Dig, dump, roll, dig again, dump again, roll again, drain, then go back the other way, just so that this thrice damned cycle could be repeated. There was no end in sight to the work, since new visitors kept coming. Neither they nor the security guards standing at the entrance to their premises and at the endpoint of their route at the shaft hid their revulsion for the poor laborers. They stood aside squeamishly, holding their noses, or the more delicate among them took a deep breath beforehand, so as not to have to exhale next to Artyom and Mark. Their faces showed such loathing that Artyom asked himself in surprise, didn't all this crap come from their guts in the first place? At the end of the day, when his hands were warm to the pulp, despite wearing enormous canvas gloves, it seemed to Artyom that he had discovered the true nature of man as well as the meaning of life. He now viewed man as a clever machine for the decomposition of food and the production of shit, functioning almost without a hitch throughout a life without meaning, if by the words meaning one has in mind some kind of ultimate goal. The meaning was in the process to break down the most food possible, convert it even faster, and eliminate the dregs. Everything that was left of smoking pork chops, juicy braised mushrooms, fluffy cakes, now rotten and contaminated. Personality traits began to fade, becoming impersonal mechanisms for the destruction of the beautiful and the useful, creating instead something putrid and worthless. Artyom was disgusted with people and felt no less aversion to them than they to him. Mark was stoically patient and tried to cheer up Artyom from time to time by saying things like, "Don't worry about it. They told me beforehand that immigration is always difficult at the beginning. And the main thing was that neither on the first nor the second day did any possibility of escape present itself. The security guards were vigilant, and although the only thing Artyom and Mark would have to do to escape was to enter the tunnel beyond the shaft, heading towards Dobrinskaya, that was simply impossible. They spent the night in the nearby closet. The door was locked carefully at night, and whatever the time of day, a guard sat at the glass booth by the entrance of the station. The third day of their stay at the station arrived. Time here had not passed according to the usual 24-hour day. It crawled along like a slug in the seconds of an unending nightmare. Artyom had already grown accustomed to the idea that nobody would ever approach him and talk to him again, and that the fate of a pariah was in store for him. It was as though he were no longer human and had turned into an inconceivable monstrous being who people saw not just as something ugly and repulsive, but also somehow perceptibly related to themselves, that scared them and repulsed them even more, as if they might catch this monstrousness from him, as if he were a leper. First he worked out an escape plan, then came a resounding void of despair. After that, a dull stupor took over, in which his intellect was disconnected from his life. He turned inward, drew in the threads of feeling and sensation, and went into a cocoon somewhere in the remote corner of consciousness. Artyom continued to work mechanically, his motions as precise as those of the head of an automaton. All he had to do was dig, dump, roll, dig again, roll again, drag, and go back the other way. Faster to start digging again. His dreams lost any meaning, and in them, just as in his waking hours, he endlessly ran, dug, pushed, dug, and ran. On the evening of the fifth day, Artyom pushed the wheelbarrow, tripped over a shovel that had been left on the floor. The wheelbarrow overturned, the contents spilled, and then he fell down into it himself. When he arose slowly from the floor, an idea suddenly popped into his head, and instead of running for a bucket and clothes, he slowly and deliberately headed for the entrance to the tunnel. He himself could feel that he was now so loathsome, so repulsive, that his aura would have to drive anyone away. just at that moment, due to an improbable confluence of circumstances, the security guard, who was invariably hanging around at the end of the route, was, for some reason, not there. Without giving a moment's thought to whether someone might be chasing him, Artyom started off across the ties. Blinded but hardly stumbling, he walked faster and faster until breaking into a run. This reason had not returned but his reason had not returned to the job of directing his body. It was still holed up, cowering in its corner. Behind him, he heard no shouts, no footsteps of pursuers, only the trolley clattering by, loaded with cargo and lighting its way with a dim lantern. Artyom simply pressed himself against the wall, letting it go past. The people on board either did not notice him or did not consider it necessary to pay him any attention. Their gazes passed over him without lingering, and they didn't say a word. Suddenly he was seized with a feeling of his own invulnerability conferred on him by his fall. Covered with stinking sludge, it was as if he had become invisible. This gave him strength, and consciousness gradually began to return. He had done it. Who knew how? Again, all good sense, despite everything, he had managed to escape from the accursed station, and nobody was even following him. It was strange, it was amazing, but it seemed to him that if he were only to try right now to comprehend what had happened, to dissect the miracle with the cold scalpel of rationality, then the magic would dissipate immediately, and the beam of the searchlight from a patrol trolley would quickly strike him in the back. Light shone at the end of the tunnel. He slackened his pace. After a minute, he was at Dobrinskaya. The border guard there satisfied himself with the simple question. Did they call for a sanitary technician? And quickly let him through, waving away the air around himself with one hand while holding the other over his mouth. Artyom had to keep moving to keep out of Hansa territory, to get out of Hansa territory fast, before the security guards finally gathered their wits, before he could hear behind him the tramp of iron-rimmed jack boots, before warning shots thundered out into the air, and then, faster. Not looking at anyone, keeping his eyes on the floor, his skin crawled with the disgust those around him felt for him. A vacuum forming around him so that he did not give to elbow his way through the dense crowd. Artyom strode to the border post. And now, what's he going to say? More questions, more demands to present his passport, how could he reply? Artyom's head hung so low that his chin touched his chest, and he saw absolutely nothing around him, so that the only thing he remembered about the whole station were dark, neatly arranged granite slabs on the floor. He kept walking, frozen with anticipation of the moment when he would hear the peremptory order to stand still. Hansa's border was closer and closer. Now, right now. What kind of rubbish is this? A gasping voice resounded with his ear. In his ear, there it was. I got lost. I'm not from here, muttered Artie, tongue-tied from nervousness, or maybe just getting into his role. Well, get the hell out of here. Do you hear me, you ugly mug? The voice sounded very persuasive, almost hypnotic, making him want to obey right away. Sure, I would, mumbled Artyom, afraid, not knowing how to get out of this one. Begging is strictly forbidden for Hansa territory. On Hansa territory, the voice said sternly. This time it was from a greater distance. Of course, right away, I have little children. Artyom finally realized what button to press, became more animated. What children? Are you nuts? The invisible border guard flew into a rage. Papa, Lamako, come here. Get this scumbag out of here. Neither Papa nor Lamako wanted to soil their hands by touching Artie, so they just shoved him in the back with the barrels of their automatics. Their superiors' angry curses flew after them. To Artyom, this sounded like heavenly music. Serpentkovskaya Station. He had left the Hansa behind. Finally, he looked up, but what he saw in the eyes of the people surrounding him made him look back, forward. This was not tidy. This was not tidy Hansa territory. He was once again in the midst of the dirty, poverty-stricken bedlam that ran throughout the rest of the metro. But even here, Artyom was too loathsome, too miraculous. The miraculous armor that had saved him along the way, making him invisible, forcing people to turn away from the fugitive and not to notice him, to let him through all the outposts and checkpoints, had now turned back into a stinking, shitty scab. Evidently, it was already past noon. Now that the initial exultation had worn off, the strange string, as if borrowed from someone else, which had forced him to keep walking across the stretch of Paveletskaya to Dobrinskaya, abruptly disappeared and left him alone with himself, hungry, deathly tired, without a penny to his name, giving off an unbearable stench, still showing traces of the blows of